Hi, it's me, Egbert, Egburt, the owner of this radio station. I invite everyone to listen, no matter if you're young, old, black, white, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, heck, I even want real estate agents listening to my station. Yes, even Rick and Tracy. You're all welcome. Now, it's back to my Goodwill ambassadors, Brad and John.
We do this show live from 7 to 8 o'clock Monday through Friday Central Time. If you're listening on the podcast or on the YouTube channel, yes, you can actually listen to the show live. If you're not in the St. Louis area, can't listen to it on 104.5 or the frequency we broadcast on, you can stream it. Just go to bjshow.co or to egbert.com. Click on Egbert's nose right there. He's telling you to you can stream it right there, and you will go directly to the stream. Well, not directly. I think you get bounced around a couple times, but you'll get that shortly. Okay, that's John Combest, Combest. We already talked about his website he puts together. Couple questions for you. You're now referring to the Missouri Independent as a progressive blog. And you're, instead of being referred to Mr., I think his name is what, Hancock? Isn't that his last name, Mr. Hancock?
Yeah, Jason Hancock, yep.
And you're referring to him as a blogger, okay? Is this intended to essentially say that you don't agree that it's a journalistic site?
Oh, no, not at all. And when you say now I refer to him as that publication as a blog, I've done that since they came around, Brad.
I didn't think you referred to it as a blog. I thought you called it a news site.
Yeah, I've referred to them as a blog since at least in print, Brad, 2021 for sure. That was the first time I think I wrote about them. So yeah, it's not new, and they are a progressive blog. You don't get them in the newspaper form, do you, Brad?
Well, no, but see, once again, the lines are blurred. Isn't it the Kansas City Star that's no longer a newspaper in the form?
No, they still do a print publication.
Well, is there another paper in Kansas City that's internet only?
Not that I know of. I mean, maybe the Pitch. There's another blog over there called the Beacon. The Kansas City Beacon is another blog. Yeah, but the Missouri Independent has been a progressive blog since. I mean, they've never had a publication. They're not a TV outlet. They're not a radio station. So if they're not a blog, I don't know what they would be.
Okay. Move on to something else. I read an article over the weekend, which I thought was somewhat interesting, and to the point where once again, it's one of these head scratchers. It's an article about Seattle, and the article talks about the fact. Matter of fact, the title of the article is, the headline is, "Seattle volunteer groups make dangerous discovery during a homeless encampment cleanup, ticking time bomb." Now, the main part of the article is talking about this volunteer group that's going through and cleaning up these homeless areas, and they are running into all sorts of hazmat and dangerous things, and apparently the propane cylinders that they're using for cooking and things like that are very, 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 very common. And not only that, apparently the people who are using the propane cylinders, and if you've ever used those before, we're talking like the kind you use like for your backyard barbecue, and probably even the smaller ones, like the smaller ones you'd use for like sweating joints for copper and things like that. If you don't treat those properly, they can be literally like a bomb. They really can.
Yeah.
But the interesting part of this article is, why do you think the volunteer group is doing this? Why isn't the city doing this?
Oh, because it's too dangerous.
It's what?
It's too dangerous.
You cut out there for a minute. You're saying because the city's too dangerous, right? Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm saying I'm saying maybe I'm cutting out here because what I'm saying is that removing those and handling that hazardous material would be too risky for city employees.
Well, the interesting part of it is that's not the reason. The interesting part of the article is that it's not in the job description that's in the city employees. Matter of fact, here we go. I'll read this to you. This is the CEO of the We Heart Seattle, which is one of the volunteer groups. The city of Seattle has two very limiting policies that restrict employees from tackling the decimation of our green belts as a result of unsanctioned camping. Those two policies, known as Multi-Department Administration Rules, MDRS, apply to city workers to stand back if debris is on a slope or within 20 feet of a structure. Okay, so you see something here? Do you see a parallel? debris on a slope. Remember,
I do.
Remember, we heard this about the Secret Service, that the reason they
Yes.
couldn't have the Secret Service guys on the roof is because it's a slope. Okay, so let me read this again. City workers have to stand back if debris is on a slope or within 20 feet of a structure, and they declare that a tent is a structure. Now, once again,
Yeah, of course it is, Brad.
now, okay. And here, I'm keep going. This red tape has accumulated millions of pounds of trash, propane tanks of fuel, weapons, human waste buckets, bottles, metals, and rotting disease spreading garbage in our green belts, which are Seattle Parks and Recreation's responsibility to maintain. SPR has gone on record to say that green belts simply are not a priority to maintain. Adding the two paralyzing policies, the trash builds, and for decades, thankfully volunteer-led grassroots groups like We Heart Seattle and a cleaner alky. What is a cleaner alky? Is that ALKI? Is that some like local area in Seattle or something like that?
It must be, or it's the local alcoholic.
It's ALKI, not ALCI. Okay, a cleaner alky are taking on cleanups as a vital gap to fill, to restore green spaces and public safety. Okay. The Parks Department is responsible for the green belt areas of Seattle, okay? But yet the Parks Department is specifically prohibited from going in these areas if there's A, a slope, or B, if there's a structure. Now, think about that for a minute. Is that like crazy lunatic BS bureaucrat stuff or what? And that's what I meant.
Yeah,
BS.
I mean, but isn't that a CYA? Because can you imagine a Parks employee? Just imagine the lawsuit in 2025. A Parks employee was sent, and he didn't know that there was going to be an explosive item, and it blew his hand off. And it's all because he was forced. He was pressured to clean up. And you know what? It wasn't in his job description, but the city made him do it anyway.
Yeah, but
so you know what you have to do? You have to hire for a huge amount of money. If the city was ever going to clean it up, they would have to hire a third party to go out there and do it. And so you might as well just have the volunteers go out there and get disgusting diseases and melt their hands too.
Well, first off, okay, you mentioned about things exploding. Okay, you call in the bomb squad. You know what I mean? Isn't that what they're there for? You call, the explosive ordnance guys who go in and, and what's so crazy about this is, if the city or the county or the state or the feds want to use a law against you, oh my God, they'll make it tough for your life. But when you say to the city or the county, whatever governmental entity, hey, can you fix this problem? They'll use the same laws to say, oh, can't touch it. Sorry, not our problem. We can't have it. It's a slope. He's too close to the structure. I mean, is that BS or what?
Yeah, and I'm guessing if you're in Seattle, you just, at a certain point, you hope that it gets so bad that somebody else comes in and fix the problem. And it looks like that's what's happening now. The volunteers have to go out there and try to clean this stuff up because Lord knows the city's not going to do it. And by the way, the idea in 2024 that you can't put anything in a job contract that says other duties as assigned, like how many jobs did you work in your youth, Brad? When you were a curb boy, if you were like, don't think I could pick up that litter because there might be somebody's germs on it.
Well, I mean, once again, we were told to do what the boss told us to do. We did.
Yeah.
That was and how many jobs have I had like that? I mean, I can think of all the crazy. I mean, like, for example, my beginning radio career, I mean, I had a couple program directors who were just what crazy. And we would do, I mean, like, for example, back in the day, we would have to do the music logs, okay? And the program director we had at the time, I called him Mr. Taco Sauce. His real name was Rick Torcaso, but I called him Taco Sauce. And he came up with this very convoluted system where we would manually have to sit down and we would have to program. And here was the rules. We could not program our own show. We had to program someone else's show because that way we wouldn't be playing our favorite songs. But he had this very complicated system of doing it. So once again, we learned how to essentially speed things up. We learned how to get the system. We learned to the point where we got to the point where we could knock out a 4-hour show in like 20 or 30 minutes. So what does he do? He sees that we're not spending like an hour and a half programming, this music every day. And so he makes the rules even more crazy because he says there's no way we could be able to do that in as little time as we were doing it because we got good at it. Okay. So in other words, it's to the point where it's like, okay, so what are you trying to do? Are you trying to get us to program the music properly? Are you just trying to make it to the point where you're trying to make our lives difficult? Well, guess what? He was trying to make our lives difficult. I mean, how many times do you hear crazy, weird? I mean, like sometimes, nothing against unions, but I have friends of mine that are unions and in a union, and they'll tell me crazy stories about certain things they can or cannot do. And I go, why is that? Well, union regulations. And it turns out that this was true 50 years ago. There was something which doesn't exist.
Like if you were to hold an event downtown, the people who are setting up the stage can't touch anything that's electrical.
Well, here, I'll give you a perfect example. Okay, my old boss, Ron Grubbs, used to work at the old, matter of fact, he worked at KSDK, or he actually worked at KSD Radio. And at the time, the Pulitzer organization owned the Post-Dispatch. They owned Channel 5, I don't know if you remember this or not, and they owned KSD Radio. And he talked about the fact that there in the radio station in KSD, there were 6 different unions, okay? 6 different unions. And in the air studio, there were 4 unions. You had IBEW Local 4, which was the electrical, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Local 4, which was the broadcast union. That was the guy who turned the knobs, okay? He was, and the disc jockey didn't touch any equipment. He wasn't allowed to touch any equipment. The disc jockey was sitting behind the microphone. He was an AFTRA, okay? If a light went out in the studio, and interestingly enough, you could not turn the lights on and off in the studio because if you did that, you got a union's grievance filed against you because that was IEBW local number 1, which was the electrical. Now the best is yet to come. And back in the day, they were still using records. And they had a guy in the studio who would cue up the records. Back in the day when we were using vinyl, we'd actually you'd put this knob in what they call the cue position, and you'd put the needle on the record, and you'd find where the record started, and you would literally back cue you would turn the record backwards like a half turn. So when you hit the start button on the turntable, the record started right on the cut you wanted. There was an old contract, a carryover from the American Federation of Musicians when they used to have live bands in the studio at KSD. There was a musician union member in the studio who would cue the records. So in the studio, you had 4 guys, unions. Then in the front office, part of the people were, I can't remember what he told me, some of the people were one union. They were like in the pressman's union. These were like secretaries and things like that. And then the people who were like, who wrote commercials and things like that, they were in the Writers Guild or some crazy thing. So you had 6 unions. And once again, I can remember stories when I first got into the business. I had friends of mine that worked at TV stations, and I had a guy that worked at Channel 4 for a while, and he worked there a long time actually. He would tell stories about if he brushed against like a camera, one of the engineers would file a grievance against him because he was not allowed to touch the camera, not allowed to touch any equipment. Even if he walked by the camera and didn't intend on touching it, but if he brushed by it, he'd have a union's grievance filed against him. It's like, okay, come on. You know what I mean?
And also the camera would file a Me Too complaint, too, because it'd be like, oh, it was more than brushing against.
Yeah.
It's a pattern of behavior. Brad, I can't believe that exactly 1 week after Labor Day, you're besmirching unions.
No, see, here's the craziest part of it. I do understand the aspect of unions. And once again, if you go way back in history, the unions were essentially formed because the working conditions were incredibly oppressive. Let's be honest. The men who ran the corporations, they didn't care. Knock out the product. You lose a finger, get an arm torn off, no big deal. We'll get somebody else in there. You know what I mean? I get that. But once again, in today's environment, you've got all these government watchdogs, OSHA being the biggest one. I mean, they've really supplanted sort of what the union was all about because safety in the workplace is not necessarily a union thing. It's a federal thing, But
yeah, I do. And let's get back to the Seattle thing. Are you joining us today at noon? We're cleaning up the median on Mexico Road. There's a lot of vape pens. A lot of people people used to throw their cigs out the window, but now they throw their vape pens out the window.
Do you know what I see all the time in parking lots? I see
What's
those.
that?
No, I see those little things. They're like little. How do I put it? They're the little one thing. They're the flossing things. The little.
Oh, yeah. No, I've seen those in parking lots a lot. And, those are quite popular in the black community.
The flossing things?
Yeah, you won't see, you'll very rarely see the miniature flossers. And you're not going to see them on the ground outside Schnucks and Wildwood, but you'll see them off Page Avenue. You'll see them. Yeah, they're. But Brad, I remember being as a youth, as a teenager, seeing them all over parking lots. If somebody in Ferguson, and I remember a friend of mine in Ferguson would be like, "Oh yeah, they're just everybody I go to school with keeps them in their car, just floss while they drive."
Why is that? Is that? I mean, I see.
Well,
those...
I think you would. I would make. Hold on, let me interrupt. I would make a St. Louis Public Radio argument that because the healthcare industry discriminates against African Americans, they have to take more of the responsibility for dental care among themselves, and because they're overworked and not paid enough, they have to multitask. So they have to drive and floss at the same time. Whereas you and I, like clockwork, will go into our dentist every 6 months. Because of the discriminatory nature of the American healthcare system, black people have to take dental care. They have to shoulder the burden themselves, Brad.
That is John Combest being facetious as he always is. And it reminds me of, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, when I heard the 3 black professors who were on NPR. Actually, they were on 1A, which comes out of WAMU. That's the American University radio station, which is one of the program providers for KWMU, where they were discussing how it was terrible that disco was essentially what do you call it? Culturally appropriated from the black people. And I'm going like, huh? I'm going like, I lived the disco era. And there were a lot of black artists who made a lot of money with disco music.
Absolutely.
It wasn't like the white people grabbed all the music and said, "Oh, you black people, you can't make any money." Let me think. Donna Summer. I mean, the guy who was still, matter of fact, I think he's going to be in town for something real soon. The guy who is an incredible studio musician who started the group called Chic. And his name, I think his name is Nile Rodgers, is his name. This guy's made millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. And his big claim to fame was he started sort of the disco revolution with a lot of stuff. He came out, Freak Out, Little Freak.
Yeah, and didn't they sing Brick House?
No, that was the Commodores.
Oh, okay.
Brick House, yes. But see, once again, there we go again. The Commodores, I'm going like, okay, and she's talking like, well, the black people didn't make any money off of disco. I'm going, what? That's like saying black football players don't make any money. Like, hold on a minute now. The majority of the football players in the NFL are black, and if you looked at the amount of money that's going to the black players as opposed to the white players, I think the blacks make a heck of a lot more money. Now, I'm not saying dollar for dollar, but I'm saying if you totaled up the payments of all the NFL teams to black and white, I think the black players are probably making 3 or 4 times what the white guys are making. Don't you think?
I agree, but we hear that all the time when you white people. I'm 1% Senegalese, so I can say this. When you white people are out there rioting and burning down buildings, all you talk about is the unfairness and the systemic racism. We're tired of hearing about it. Right?
Well,
if you want to change it, white people, just go out and work. You know what I'm saying? Stop destroying your own communities. Stop killing each other, white people. Go out and make a positive change in your communities and stop rioting and complaining all the time.
Well, to a certain extent, the pushback on the Caitlin Clark thing is racial as well, too, because there's a lot of people going, well, hold it, she's white. Yeah, so what? You have to be black to be. There's guys like, Larry Bird? He was a white dude. And although I'm trying to think, are there any, off the top of my head, are there any big NBA stars right now who are white? I don't know, probably not. Okay, we have to move on. Time for a break.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?